They said Christmas was canceled, too broke for a big gathering. So why did I see my mom dancing under chandeliers the same night? My name is Sophia Coppola. I'm 35, single, and I work as an internal event strategist at Allura Beauty Group, a cosmetics conglomerate based in Denver. I've been there almost 7 years. My job is to organize product launches, corporate retreats, and board dinners that look effortless but require sleepless nights and logistical miracles. I don't mind it. I've always been the one who handles things, the calm in the storm, the woman who doesn't complain, just adjusts her headset and gets the job done in my personal life. That role never turned off. My mother, Grace, remarried when I was 13. Her new husband, Todd, was a real estate broker from Texas with slicked back hair and a new age parenting style that mostly meant ignoring me. Then came Megan, my younger half-sister, blonde, charming, impulsive, the kind of girl who breaks a vase and gets praised for her creativity. I was the fixer, the quiet one, the one who understood responsibility. Over the years, I moved around for school and later for work. I never missed a holiday, though every December I flew back to Austin, booked my own hotel, wrapped everyone's gifts carefully, and helped my mom set the table while Megan showed up late with her latest boyfriend and stories about TikTok brand deals. I never asked for anything. I just showed up, smiled, and picked up the slack. 3 years ago, when my stepdad's second property flooded, I quietly transferred the insurance deductible to my mother's account. Last summer, when Megan couldn't make rent because of a modeling trip to Tulum, I covered it. No fanfare, no reminder. I told myself it was what family did. And honestly, I didn't want recognition. I just didn't want anyone to fall apart. This year, I took time off early to help with the holiday prep. I ordered custom name tags for the table, reprinted old family recipes in a keepsake format, and sent a batch of luxury candles to the house in advance. I asked Mom if she needed help with decor. She replied, "Maybe just bring yourself this time." That should have felt off. But I didn't read into it, not until December 18th, when I received a group message. It was from my mother. No greeting, no explanation. Just, "Hi girls, we've decided not to host Christmas this year. Things are a little tight, and with everything going on, we think it's best to cancel the gathering. Hope you understand. Love you." That was it. One message, sent to me and Megan. Nothing about rescheduling. No invitation to do something smaller. No voice call, even though I'd spoken to Mom just a few days before. I stared at my phone, unsure if it was real. I waited for Megan to respond. She just replied with a Santa emoji and a "totally get it, no stress." That was when I knew something was wrong. Not because she wasn't upset, but because she sounded rehearsed. But I didn't ask questions. I just said, "Understood." Then I booked a quiet table for one at a restaurant near my apartment, picked out a bottle of wine I knew I'd finish alone, and tried not to feel like I'd done something wrong. I didn't cancel my vacation days. I needed the break anyway. On Christmas Eve, I put on a playlist of old holiday jazz, lit the same candle I had sent to Mom, and tried to recreate the scent of home. There was a lump in my chest that wouldn't go away, but I told myself it was just fatigue. Maybe this was the year we all just needed rest. Then, at 9:17 p.m., I got a text from Karen, my colleague. "Is that your mom on Megan's story? This party looks insane." I didn't even understand what she meant until I opened Instagram. There it was, a full video from Megan's page. The house decked in lights, A massive dinner table glowing under rented chandeliers. A bartender shaking cocktails in the kitchen. My mother standing next to Todd, both of them dressed in formal red and gold, smiling as Megan shouted, "Merry Christmas, legends." I froze. My name wasn't mentioned. My chair wasn't set, and in the background, I could see a woman using the candle I had mailed, the one I never got a thank you for. I stared at the screen, unable to blink. That wasn't a canceled Christmas. That was a celebration I had been excluded from, intentionally. Not because they couldn't afford it, but because, for the first time, they didn't want me there, and they didn't even have the decency to lie convincingly. I didn't react the way people expect when something like that happens. I didn't call to demand an explanation, didn't send a passive-aggressive text, didn't even comment on the video. I simply closed the app, turned off my phone, and sat in silence while the candle flickered beside a meal I no longer had the appetite to finish. There was no dramatic breakdown, just a deep, bone-level cold that settled quietly inside my chest. I knew what I'd seen, and more importantly, I knew what it meant. I had not been forgotten. I had been removed. The next morning, Christmas Day, I stayed in bed later than usual. No video calls, no new messages, not even a group text, just quiet. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched a family across the street unloading wrapped boxes from their car. Their laughter didn't hurt me. It reminded me that somewhere, people chose each other, even when it was inconvenient. Around noon, I opened my laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet I hadn't touched in months. I called it Extras, though it could have just as easily been labeled Everything I Was Never Asked For. It was where I tracked every wire transfer, every utility I paid for back home, every Venmo sent quietly just this once. I hadn't created it out of resentment. At the time, it felt like responsibility. But seeing the numbers now itemized, unreciprocated, it hit differently. Todd's second property in San Marcos, Megan's last-minute medical bill, the mortgage overage in April that Mom never explained, Spotify Premium for 4 people, 3 phone plans, a few furniture orders I'd covered until your refund comes through. It added up to more than I wanted to admit. I didn't feel anger as I looked at the figures. I felt clarity. These people hadn't just forgotten me for Christmas. They had never really seen me to begin with. The final push came 2 days later when I received a single-line email from Todd. No subject, no greeting, just, "Can you cover $2,500 for the property tax? Time sensitive." That was the first time in my adult life I didn't reply. I didn't explain, didn't stall, didn't apologize for needing time. I just archived the message and opened a new tab. One by one, I began removing my name from their comfort, the cable account under my email, the cell plan linked to my card, the emergency fund account that Mom had access to. I paused at the electric bill, not because I felt guilt, but because I remembered a night 4 years earlier when the power had gone out unexpectedly and Megan had called me crying. I had paid the overdue balance before she even finished the sentence. That night came back to me, sharp and strange. She hadn't called to say thank you. She had texted a day later to ask if I could also cover gas. By evening, everything was shut down. No more automatic payments, no more quiet lifelines. I didn't send a dramatic notice. I didn't announce it in the group chat. I just let the silence grow in their direction for once. The next day, Megan texted, "Spotify not working. Did it get hacked?" I didn't answer. An hour later, Mom emailed, "Phone service seems off. Can you check the account?" Still, I didn't answer. The questions kept coming. Todd called 3 times, then left a voicemail asking if I'd seen his email. I hadn't. I'd blocked his address. There's something surreal about watching people scramble when you finally stop holding the net beneath them. No apologies, no recognition, just inconvenience disguised as concern. That week, I returned to work early. I told my boss I had changed my mind about taking the full holiday week. She didn't ask questions, just said, "We're glad to have you back." Karen, my coworker, noticed I was quieter than usual, but she didn't pry. She just brought me a coffee and said, "Some years, you just skip the holiday part." I nodded. She was right. That year, I skipped the performance, and without realizing it, I had started rewriting the role I had been forced to play for decades. The version of me they depended on didn't exist anymore. The one who kept the peace, the one who stayed silent, the one who paid without question and smiled through omissions. She was gone, and I didn't know who I'd become next, but I was finally willing to find out. By the end of that week, the silence I had extended was beginning to echo back. The Spotify texts turned into emails. The missed calls turned into voicemails. And slowly, each member of my family began to shift from confused to unsettled. Megan left a voice note 2 days later, trying to sound casual. "Hey, random question. Did you switch something on the phone plan? I think mine cut off mid-call. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, she sent a second one. This time her tone sharpened. Okay, if this is some kind of punishment thing, it's not cool. Can we just talk?" I listened to both, but didn't save them. I wasn't punishing her. I was just done pretending I owed her comfort for her silence. Then Mom called from a new number. I let it ring. The voicemail was shakier than Megan's. "Sophia, we didn't mean to hurt you. It wasn't supposed to feel like exclusion. Things just happened fast." She didn't mention the party. She didn't mention the lie. She didn't mention me watching it unfold from 3 states away. Instead, she asked if I could just send the last car payment for Megan's lease like I had before, as if none of it mattered, as if the betrayal hadn't occurred. I sat with the message for a long time, not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I finally knew I didn't have to. That weekend, I deleted the shared folders. I removed myself from every family app we'd ever used. I even archived the old email chain titled Coppola Family Planning, where I'd planned birthdays and retirements and last-minute vacations that always included everyone but me. Every year, I had assumed they were just forgetful. Now, I saw it for what it was. I was useful, not loved, convenient, not chosen. Todd hadn't reached out yet, but I wasn't surprised. He was the kind of man who waited until something hit his wallet before calling it a problem. And sure enough, on Monday morning, I got a brief message, "Utilities unpaid. Thought you said you'd handle that last quarter." No greeting, no question about my well-being. Just a reminder that he still saw me as operations, not family. I replied once, just once. That arrangement ended the night I saw your chandelier on Megan's story. I didn't explain further. I didn't answer when he replied with a dismissive, "Don't be dramatic." By then, it wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about showing something to myself. For the first time, I wasn't absorbing their discomfort to keep the family illusion intact. I was letting it break, letting the cracks show where they had always been. It was strange how quickly their messages shifted once they realized I wasn't coming back. At first, there were polite questions. Then came the justifications. Then the blame. "You've always been cold. You read too much into things." We didn't think it would upset you like that. But nothing hit me harder than a voicemail from Aunt Riley, a distant but vocal relative who had always taken Mom's side. Her voice was sharp, half-whispered. "Sophia, I just wanted to say, I'm disappointed. Family sticks together. We don't walk out when things get hard." She paused like she was hoping I'd pick up mid-message. "If you don't come back soon, people will start thinking you've lost it." I listened to the whole thing, then played it again, just to be sure I heard right. Not one person had asked what happened. Not one had admitted the truth. They were all more concerned with the fallout than the fracture. It was never about healing. It was always about control. I printed the transcript of that voicemail and taped it to my fridge. Not out of spite, but as a reminder, that was how much they valued my presence. Not because I was loved, but because I was silent, because I was useful, because I showed up and kept their story clean. And now that I wasn't doing that, I had become inconvenient. The narrative was already shifting. I was being written out again, only this time as the villain who left, not the daughter they quietly cut out. And I didn't care. What surprised me most wasn't the anger, but the stillness that followed. There were no more wires pulling me back, no threads left to hold the illusion together. I was no longer the fixer. I was no longer theirs. The new year arrived without celebration. No calls, no forwarded memes, no awkward family jokes about resolutions no one would keep. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't sting. It felt clean, like the space after a storm when everything has already fallen. I went back to work fully, poured my focus into preparing the leadership summit we had scheduled for February, and found small comfort in the rhythm of logistics, timelines, and spreadsheets that obeyed logic unlike people. Karen asked once if I had plans to visit family in the spring. I told her I didn't. She didn't push. But the past always finds a way to slip through. About 10 days into January, I received a letter in the mail, not an email, not a voicemail, but an actual letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's cursive, the same loops she used to write lunch notes back in elementary school. I stared at the envelope for hours before I opened it. Inside were 4 pages, all handwritten. The opening was soft, reflective. She apologized for not being clearer about the holiday situation, said things had spiraled faster than expected, and she regretted how it may have made me feel. The wording was careful, too careful. She didn't say sorry for excluding me. She said sorry for how I might have interpreted it, as if my feelings were the problem, as if exclusion, when done quietly enough, could be blamed on the person who noticed it. But what stayed with me wasn't the apology. It was one sentence, buried near the bottom. "We didn't think it would hurt you so badly," she wrote. "We assumed you were used to being on your own." That sentence sat with me for days. Used to being on your own, not chosen, not prioritized, just expected to endure. It was more honest than she meant it to be. She hadn't thought it would hurt because they had trained themselves to see my silence as strength, not survival, and they had grown addicted to the benefits of my endurance. When I didn't show pain, they assumed there wasn't any, and when I finally pulled back, they saw it as betrayal, not boundary. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer I didn't open often, not because I needed to keep it, but because some truths don't need to be destroyed. They need to be remembered. That same night, I updated my will. I didn't have much, but there were things savings, a few assets, a share in a small property I had inherited from my father's side years ago. It was originally meant to be passed to Megan after me. something my stepfather insisted would keep things fair. But the deed was under my name now, fully, and for the first time. I questioned the idea of fairness. Fairness had become a tool to silence the child who never asked for more. So I changed it. I reassigned it to a nonprofit that provided housing for women aging out of the foster system, not out of spite, out of purpose. Let something useful come from something that had once felt so hollow. Days passed. Then came the text from Megan, not from her number, but from a friend's phone. "You're ruining everything," she wrote. "You're being extra. What do you even want from us?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The question wasn't about understanding me. It was about managing me, about guilt-tripping me back into compliance. She didn't ask what I felt. She just wanted me to stop being a problem. But I wasn't a problem. I was a consequence they never imagined would grow a spine, would stop funding the illusion, would walk away without a scene. A week later, I received a final note. No return address, just a photo tucked inside. A print from Christmas night, all of them smiling, holding drinks. Megan in the center like she always was. My mother, Todd, a few neighbors, even Aunt Riley, on the back. Someone had written in pen. We still had a great time. No signature, no message, just that line. I laughed not bitterly, not sarcastically, but with the quiet realization that it wasn't meant to invite me back. It was meant to wound me one last time, a final jab from people who couldn't believe their scapegoat had exited the script. But the irony was sharp. If they were really fine, they wouldn't need to send a photo. They wouldn't need to prove anything. They wouldn't still be thinking about me. I kept the photo for a week. I didn't pin it to the fridge or throw it in the trash. I let it sit on the kitchen counter, face down, edges curling slightly as if the paper itself was unsure of its purpose. Some mornings I'd glance at it while pouring coffee, wondering if they expected it to pull me back into orbit. Maybe they hoped I'd feel regret, or guilt, or nostalgia. I felt none of those things. What I felt was distance, and not just physical miles, the kind of distance you earn when you stop begging to be seen and start choosing what deserves your presence. One afternoon, I tucked it into an old recipe box at the back of my cabinet. I didn't need to look at it again. Its message had already done its job. It confirmed what I'd long suspected: they never missed me. Only the version of me that didn't say no. I began cleaning my apartment differently. Not just dusting or rearranging furniture, but stripping out things that no longer felt honest. There were mugs from family trips I didn't enjoy, photo frames I kept only to fill space, and emails I archived but never opened. I cleared it all. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't revenge. It was just the first time I allowed myself to build a space where I didn't have to perform. I even changed the scent in my home, switching from the pine candles I used to send my mother to something warmer, quieter cardamom and amber, something they wouldn't recognize. At work, I shifted too. I took on fewer volunteer tasks, stopped staying late to cover for people who missed deadlines, and declined back-to-back meetings I had once accepted out of obligation. People noticed, but no one complained. If anything, they adjusted. Karen, whose sharpness masked a deep sense of intuition, asked me one evening while walking to our cars, "Are you okay? Or are you just finally done pretending I smiled?" A little of both. She nodded, didn't press, just offered to pick up our next coffee tab, which felt more human than 100 sorries. It wasn't until late January that I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Harper. She was the 10-year-old girl who lived in the apartment across from mine, the one I used to babysit when her mom worked double shifts. Harper was older now, obviously, more independent, but still loved painting and still knocked on my door every Halloween with a new costume and a question about makeup. I asked her if she wanted help prepping for her school art fair. She said yes before I finished the sentence. That weekend, we spread out canvases and brushes across my floor and spent hours painting in companionable silence. She didn't ask about my family. She didn't ask why I looked more tired than usual. She just handed me colors when I paused too long. And somehow, that simple gesture did more to stitch me back together than all the apologies I never received. In February, I took a solo trip to the mountains. No itinerary, no schedule. I hiked, I slept in, I read books I had bought 5 years ago and never opened. I sat by a fire pit with strangers and let my phone die for an entire day. For the first time, I felt what it was like to exist without waiting for someone to need me. It didn't feel lonely. It felt expansive, like space I had never allowed myself to claim was finally available. I thought about texting Megan once, not to reopen anything, just to tell her I was okay, but I didn't, because I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for the version of myself I had silenced for years, the version who used to wonder what life would look like if she stopped being the fallback plan. I came home to a quiet inbox, a clean apartment, and a full heart. No drama, no chaos, just the stillness I had built from the ground up. And that stillness wasn't emptiness. It was the absence of manipulation, the absence of guilt, the absence of roles I never auditioned for, but somehow got cast in anyway. I wasn't playing daughter, sister, provider, fixer. I was just being, and that, for the first time in decades, was enough. The emails started again in early March, not a flood, just quiet pulses that tried to sound normal. One from Todd asking if I still had access to the shared Dropbox folder with the scanned property documents. Another from Megan, written like a casual check-in, asking what brand of facial serum I had sent her last year because she wanted to reorder it. They never mentioned Christmas. They never acknowledged the silence that had stretched across 3 months, like a river no one dared to cross. It was as if they were testing the current, dropping lines into the water, hoping I might bite. I didn't. Their messages remained unopened, marked unread in a folder I titled Static. I didn't do it to be petty. I did it because it helped me remember the difference between connection and noise. One day, I got a letter from a bank I didn't recognize at first. Inside was a notification about a failed login attempt to an old joint savings account I had opened for emergency purposes when Mom went through a short medical scare years ago. I hadn't touched it in months, had almost forgotten it existed, but someone hadn't. The attempt had been made from a device still registered to an iPad linked to the family Wi-Fi. I called the bank, confirmed the access was blocked, then requested the account be closed permanently. The woman on the other end of the line asked if I wanted to assign a backup contact. I said no. I wanted no fallback, no reroute, no second entrance. It's strange how people who once treated your boundaries like inconveniences begin to panic when you finally enforce them. That week, Megan called from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was tight, trembling in a way that felt less like sadness and more like frustration. "I don't know what you're trying to prove," she said. "You think we're horrible, fine, but you could have just said something. You didn't have to ghost everyone like we're strangers." I played the message twice, not because I was moved, but because I wanted to be sure I heard her right. The same person who sat smiling under chandeliers while I ate frozen lasagna alone was now hurt that I had gone quiet. The irony wasn't lost on me. Later that day, I got another email, this time from my mother. The subject line read, "Just one thing. The body was short. I read your silence. I feel it. I know you're angry. I just wish you'd said something sooner. We could have fixed it." I didn't respond, not because I hadn't thought of what to say, but because I had already said it in every bill I paid, in every birthday I showed up for, in every apology I accepted without hearing. The proof wasn't in the words I didn't speak. It was in the effort they never returned. And now that the benefits were gone, they were ready to remember my name. That night, I went through a digital folder I had created for financial records. It included every transfer I had sent them in the past 5 years, every rent payment, copay, bill, grocery top-up, surprise loan that was never repaid. I had never tracked it to ask for it back. I tracked it because I needed a record of the version of me they had used. The total wasn't shocking. It was confirming. Over $38,000, not including the unpaid emotional debt of always being the one who understood. I printed it, added a quiet letter, calm, precise, free of blame, and I mailed it to them separately. No demand for repayment, just a statement of closure. I titled it, "For the Record." That weekend, I bought paint, not for anyone else, not for Harper, just for me. I set up a small table near the window, played music I didn't have to explain to anyone, and let my hands move without purpose. Something about color on canvas reminded me that expression didn't need permission, that healing didn't require applause, that quiet, when chosen, can be power instead of punishment. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt release, like I had been holding something heavy for years, not realizing I was allowed to put it down. And when I finally did, the only sound was peace. By mid-March, the messages slowed again, but this time the silence wasn't mine. It was theirs. After I sent the itemized log and the letter, something shifted. I didn't get another email from Megan, not another half apology from Mom, not even a sarcastic text from Todd disguised as a joke. At first, it felt like another layer of abandonment. Then I realized it wasn't silence out of anger. It was retreat. They didn't know what to do with a version of me they couldn't guilt, fix, or financially access. The person I had been for them, the reliable one, the agreeable one, was no longer playing her part. And without that script, they had no dialogue left. There was one more attempt, though it came in the form of Aunt Riley. She showed up at my office unannounced. I saw her through the glass wall while I was reviewing event logistics with my team. She wore that same mauve blazer she always brought to holidays. Her mouth pursed like she'd been practicing a speech. I excused myself, walked out calmly, and asked the receptionist to escort her back to the elevator. I didn't even say hello. She looked shocked, almost offended, like I had broken some sacred code of family civility. But I didn't owe her my time, not after she had left a voicemail weeks earlier saying she was disappointed in me without ever asking what had actually happened. People like her were never interested in truth. They were invested in preserving appearances, even if that meant making you the villain in a story they refused to see clearly. That evening, I sat by the window again, the same one where I used to watch the neighborhood lights during holidays and wonder why I still felt alone after doing everything right. This time, the quiet was different. It didn't ache. It expanded. It gave me room to consider things I had never allowed myself to want. a larger apartment, a studio space, a new city, not as escape, but as expression. I opened a fresh notebook, wrote down 3 places I'd always imagined living, and began researching neighborhoods, not just for cost or safety or job proximity, but for peace, for light, for the kind of mornings where no one expects you to carry their needs before you've even poured your coffee. A few weeks later, I gave notice to my landlord, not out of urgency, but readiness. I found a second-floor unit in a quiet area across town. It had high ceilings, good sun, and a spare room I could turn into an art corner or guest space, though I wasn't in a rush to fill it. I moved over the course of a weekend. No announcements, no invites, no need to justify a fresh start to people who hadn't earned a seat in my new chapter. Karen helped carry boxes. At one point, she paused in the doorway and said, "You look taller here, like the air's lighter." I smiled and told her it was. And for the first time, I meant it. That Sunday night, while unpacking, I found a small photo strip from a company event years ago. It was one of the rare moments where I looked genuinely happy, standing between 2 interns, laughing, my face relaxed in a way it rarely was in family pictures. I pinned it above my desk, not to remember the moment, but to remember the version of me that existed when I wasn't trying to earn love. She was in there all along. She had just been quiet, waiting. One morning in April, I received a handwritten card, no envelope. It had been slipped under my door. The handwriting was unmistakably Megan's, a mix of cursive and caps. Always dramatic. Inside was a single sentence. "You win. Happy now." There was no name, no context, just that line. It didn't sting. It didn't even surprise me, because even in surrender, she needed to make me feel like I had waged a war. I didn't reply. I tore it once, dropped it in the trash, and went back to making breakfast. That's the thing no one tells you about choosing yourself after being someone's safety net for too long. The fallout isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just quiet resignation from those who only valued you when you stayed small. They don't know how to love a version of you that doesn't serve them, and they never learned how to respect someone who simply walks away. April drifted by quietly, like a chapter that no longer needed to prove itself. I stopped checking the inbox tied to my family contacts. I unsubscribed from Megan's brand emails. I even removed the calendar alerts I used to set for birthdays. I never received thanks for remembering. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. I had spent years trying to be the kind of daughter who never made noise, the kind of sister who always stayed available, and the kind of adult who picked up the slack without making anyone feel guilty. But when you grow up being useful more than loved, you start to confuse the two. And eventually, silence becomes a survival skill, not a virtue. In my new apartment, the light hit differently in the mornings. It wasn't just about the windows or the layout. It was about waking up without the heaviness of unsaid obligations. No more wondering if someone was going to ask for help they never thanked me for. No more calculating how much emotional weight I could carry before someone noticed. I went to bed earlier. I started walking before work instead of answering emails from people who thought, "Can you help?" was a full sentence. I painted without a plan, cooked meals I didn't photograph, and talked to Harper about books instead of problems. My world shrank beautifully, not in limitation, but in focus. Then one Friday afternoon, I received an email from Alora's regional director. He asked if I would consider taking over the Western Events portfolio. It was a step up, a broader scope, and came with more autonomy. I read the email twice before answering, not because I didn't think I could do it, but because I realized no part of me wanted to ask for permission. I wrote back one sentence: "I'm ready when you are." And I meant it. That Monday. We announced the transition quietly. Karen smiled when she heard and simply said, "About time." There were no congratulations from family, no proud of you messages, and for the first time, that absence didn't sting, it freed me. A few days later, I walked past a cafe near my building and noticed a mother and daughter seated by the window, laughing over hot drinks. For a second, I froze, not from longing, but recognition. They looked like the version of us I used to imagine when I was younger, before the disappointments, before the performances. I watched them for less than a minute, then kept walking, not out of jealousy, out of acceptance. Some stories were never mine to begin with, and trying to force a shape into something it was never carved for only prolongs the ache. At home, I started writing again, not publicly, not professionally, just notes to myself. I wrote about things I had never said aloud, about the year Megan broke my camera and Mom made me apologize, about the night I paid for Todd's emergency dental visit with the last $600 in my account, about how they used to call me so stable when what they meant was easy to exploit. I wrote to remember, not because I needed revenge, but because I needed to stop gaslighting myself into thinking any of it had been normal. Then came Easter. I hadn't thought about it until Karen mentioned her family was flying in. She asked what my plans were, and I told her the truth. Nothing. Just some rest and painting. She nodded and said, "Sometimes peace is the plan." That weekend, I painted a series of small canvases, each with a different theme: grief, silence, memory, and finally, self-respect. I didn't name them for anyone else. I named them for myself, for the girl who used to shrink her voice to keep the table calm. Sunday morning, as I cleaned my brushes, my phone buzzed. A new number, no voicemail, just a missed call. I stared at the screen and let it fade. There was nothing left for me in that direction. I didn't need to chase closure from people who were never capable of offering it. I didn't need their explanations. I already had the truth, and it was simple. They had shown me who they were. I had finally listened. By late spring, my life had settled into something that felt quiet in a way most people never get to experience. Not boring, not lonely, but whole. The kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. I had developed a small routine that gave my days shape. Mornings started with warm coffee and light through linen curtains, followed by a walk down to the local market where people greeted me by name. Not because they needed anything from me, but because we existed in the same rhythm. I no longer felt watched or judged or weighed down by invisible expectations. No one saw me as the one who always handled things. I was just Sophia, a woman with her own keys, her own space, her own peace. At work, I noticed something else without realizing it. I had stopped over-explaining. I no longer apologized for asking for a deadline to be extended or for requesting clarity before taking on another last-minute assignment. My team respected me, not because I was the most accommodating, but because I was consistent and clear. I didn't smile to soften difficult moments. I didn't bend to avoid discomfort. And oddly, it made everything smoother. People trusted me more when they realized I wasn't working to be liked. I was working to be honest. One afternoon in May, I hosted a casual painting workshop at a small community center downtown. Harper joined me as an assistant, which she took very seriously. setting up the brushes with a precision that made me laugh. We had about 15 attendees, most of them women in their 30s and 40s, some older, some newly single, some just curious. We didn't talk about trauma or healing. We talked about color and composition and how some days it's enough just to put something on canvas and call it done. Afterward, a woman lingered to thank me. She said, "You have a calm energy. It makes people feel safe." I don't think anyone had ever said that to me before, not in those words, for years. I had been useful, available, dependable, but never peaceful, and yet here I was, giving something I had never been given, and offering it without depletion. That night, while cleaning up, I saw an email had arrived from my mother. The subject line was just my name. The message was short. "I know you don't owe us anything. I know I let you down. I hope, one day, you'll let me fix it. I don't expect a reply. Just, I miss you." I read it once, closed my laptop, and sat with it. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel the pull to call her, or to argue, or to explain all the things she still hadn't said. What I felt was recognition. She had finally stopped defending herself and simply admitted it, not in full detail, not with accountability I could count on, but enough to show me she had felt my absence more than she wanted to admit. It wasn't everything, but it was something. I didn't reply, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I wasn't ready. Forgiveness, for me, wasn't about offering closure to someone else. It was about refusing to let them keep borrowing space inside you, rent-free. I wasn't ready to offer that space again. Maybe one day, but not that night. That night was mine. The following weekend, I packed a small overnight bag and drove to a cabin I had rented on the edge of a state park. No service, no noise, just trees, water, and sky. I spent 2 days reading, sketching, sleeping when I felt tired, eating when I was hungry, and speaking out loud only to greet birds or thank the kettle for boiling. When I left on Sunday, I didn't feel transformed. I felt grounded, like my life no longer orbited anyone else's needs. And for the first time, that was enough. On the drive back, I passed a road sign pointing toward Austin. The name used to carry a weight I couldn't explain. Memories, disappointments, the ache of never quite being chosen. But that day, it felt neutral, like a city that existed, but no longer held power over me. I didn't turn. I drove straight ahead, hands steady on the wheel, windows down, music low. By early summer, I had fully settled into the version of life I never knew I was allowed to have. Not loud, not extravagant, but deeply mine. My mornings belonged to me. My thoughts no longer carried the weight of who might be disappointed. My time was no longer borrowed by people who only showed up when something broke. I wasn't healing anymore. I was living. The difference was quiet but unmistakable. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't explain my absence. I just moved through the world without dragging the past behind me like a suitcase someone else had packed. Then one evening in late June, I returned home to find an envelope on my doorstep. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, the same kind of photo Megan used to obsess over during family events. In it, I saw them all again. The backyard at Mom's house, string lights, bottled wine, laughter caught mid-frame, Megan with her arm around Todd. Mom seated in the background, smiling in a way that felt posed. On the back, someone had scribbled, "Still had a great time. No explanation, no name, just that sentence. I looked at it for a long time, not because I was hurt, but because of what it revealed. The intent wasn't to reconnect. It was to provoke, to suggest that I had missed something special. But the truth sat in my hands clearly. If they were really fine, they wouldn't have needed to send it. If they were really celebrating, they wouldn't still be thinking about the one person missing from the table. That photo didn't show joy. It showed performance, a reminder that some people would rather be seen enjoying themselves without you than admit they ever needed you there to begin with. I didn't feel the sting of exclusion. I felt the calm of release. I didn't put the photo on the fridge or toss it in the trash. I slid it into the back of a drawer where it couldn't interrupt the life I had rebuilt. One that didn't rely on family group chats or guilt-laced favors disguised as connection. I no longer lived in anticipation of an apology that would never come. And in doing so, I had quietly rewritten what closure looked like. That weekend, I hosted a small dinner at my apartment. Just a few people from work, Harper and her mom, and one of the women from the painting workshop who had become a quiet friend. There was no occasion, no agenda, just good food, candles, and conversation that didn't require emotional armor. At one point, Harper asked why I didn't have any family photos on the wall. I paused, then said, I decided to leave space for people who show up by choice. She nodded without needing further explanation, then passed me a bowl of salad like it was the most natural thing in the world, and maybe it was. Later that night, I sat by the window again, the same place where months ago I had stared at snow falling while wondering what I had done to be left out. Now I saw the opposite. I hadn't been left out. I had been removed. But in that removal, I had found clarity. I had been the quiet glue, the invisible bridge, the provider no one thanked. And when I stopped giving, they didn't just fall apart. They revealed who they had been all along. I didn't need them to collapse to prove my worth. I didn't need revenge or public fallout or confessions sent in envelopes. I just needed to walk away and stay gone long enough for the pattern to expose itself. And it did. Every voicemail, every half apology, every silence that followed a boundary. It all told the same story. I had never been asking for too much. I had just been asking the wrong people. Now, I wake up in a space that reflects who I am, not who they needed me to be. I look in the mirror and see someone I recognize, someone I trust, someone who no longer writes herself out of the picture to keep everyone else comfortable. I don't hate them. I don't need to. I've simply stopped giving them the power to name me. So if they ever ask where I went or why I never came back after that Christmas, I hope they tell the truth, that I was there for years, long before the party, long before the lies, long before the silence. I was there, quietly holding it all together, until I wasn't. And I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I finally realized I deserved to be somewhere I wasn't afraid to take up space. Have you ever walked away from people who only loved you when you stayed quiet?